Interesting conversation with Dave Wanstead last Saturday. His theory under NIL is that NCAA football will eventually be reduced to less than 40 teams, plus or minus something in that range, divided into 4 divisions.
I mean, that structure could fit. I mean, there's all kinds of different things. Like I think that we're looking at, towards the last decade or 2 decades of the NCAA in general. I think there will be an oversight body, but I think that might be changing as well. And I mean, these are things that we'll see, but also remembering like since the TV networks run the sport, in that ESPN is SEC and then Fox is Big Ten, where does this fit? Is the Fox League North and West, and then the ESPN League South and East? Or whatever. Like how does that part cross over or lay over on top of that? So there will be future movement and realignment and redistribution and all kinds of things like that. So I'm not saying that this is super crazy or anything, but like I think that there are steps along this path and other issues to consider, when having these conversations.
I think the bulk of college football fans, especially those periphery fans, would not miss the Wake Forests and the Washington States of the world, but I would hate to see a 40-team college football universe and them just kind of use and abuse what is going to be an expanded group of 5 just to use them as non-conference fodder. That just doesn't sit well with me, but that's what we might be headed toward. One thing that could be a positive that could come out of this, because we just saw a very prominent 5-star offensive lineman transfer from Iowa to Alabama before he ever played a snap, even in practice for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And that obviously doesn't sit well just generally with college football fans, that there's little commitment or attachment, but still, I, for one, and I believe most people are with me, don't want to restrict freedom of choice. That's what we all have the right to. So even though it's crazy and doesn't sit well with me as a whole, individually, I don't want them to be deprived of their rights in this country. But if we pay them, if they are formally paid, then they possibly sign a contract coming out of high school, and maybe that contract's for 2 years, maybe it's for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it might be. And that restricts in the NFL. The NFL does almost everything right, Cam, and you know that. Everything they touch turns to gold. Just about every move that they've made in the last 70 years has just been perfect. And this would be one. The way free agency is set up, I think there is a perfect balance between the average fan thinking and knowing 80% of my team is going to be back next year. So that attachment is held, but there is still this allure, this fascination, this interest in free agency. We may get a few new players. We may lose a few, but it's only a few. So it's a balance of stability, but with the excitement of movement.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is true. And, I've been following free agency for my Detroit Lions, just signed, a former Pro Bowl guard and let a guard go. So, I mean, it's not like the sexiest thing. It's not like we signed a free agent quarterback, but like, yeah, following those things along. But I just want to circle back to Kaden Proctor, Alabama. So, like, Iowa self-reported a tier 3 violation for tampering with him. If you don't remember, I'm just going to give you the quick Cliff's notes. 5-star recruit, top 10 overall in America from Iowa, was committed to Iowa, flipped late in the process to sign with Alabama. But of course, that was just out of the goodness of his heart and wanting to play for Nick Saban. There was no financial inducement. There was no NIL. There was no anything like that, because Nick Saban is a saint, and God forbid that he would have done anything like that. Sure, right, whatever. Saban retires because he doesn't want to deal with other people having advantages that he himself leveraged or different things, because like I said, I've told the $40,000 briefcase story on here because I've seen the text messages and I know that as a confirmed fact that I've seen. So he leaves and everything because he said, "Oh, I don't want to deal with this stuff," even though they were paying people when he was at Alabama, but we don't want to talk about that. Fine. He goes, Proctor, the same kid, goes home to Iowa, transfers back there. They then report and say, yes, there was a illegal connection. We're self-reporting this. And again, tier 3, that's like admitting to your boss that you took a 32-minute lunch on your 30-minute break. Like it's such a low. Now, if you're on like 17 million infractions, maybe that's going to do something. But like, if you're a normal employee in good standing, be like, "Hey, Mark, I took 32 minutes on my 30 today." Like that's the level of a tier 3 infraction. Like there's level 2, and then level 1 is like the lack of institutional control. That's why SMU got the death penalty. Like that's a tier 1 infraction. So that in like a tier 2, that's what Florida had with the who was the wide receivers coach with the coach with the bump rule, who Aubrey Hill, who bumped into Tracy Howard down here when he was recruiting for Florida years and years ago. You just happened to be down in the city like during a game week or whatever, during a dead period. And like, I know you're from the city, but like y'all had work in Gainesville in Alachua County, but you just randomly went. There's no Publix you could have gone to between Alachua County and Miami. Really, kid? So that's a tier 2 infraction. So it's even lower than that. But still, Iowa admitted we did have this infraction. So then Kaden Proctor, I saw somebody make the joke. Apparently, this is the joke, that he's a huge women's basketball fan and he just wanted to see Caitlin Clark for free. So he got the Iowa student ticket discount or the free ticket to go watch her play some basketball and everything. But then, yeah, he's already posted on his own Instagram that he's back in Alabama. So, and that's like another thing that I talk about, that there's just free movement now. Like I know that players get 2 free transfers, even if they're not grads or anything like that. But even, yeah, like he literally used both of his transfers in the off season, since his coach, like since the last game, between the last game of the season and spring practice starting. But it's just interesting because all these, sorry, I have a fly in here. But yeah, all these different kind of things and whatnot. And people, they're self-reporting these tier 3 violations, which, I mean, that's reporting a hangnail or something, like whatever. But interesting to follow. And it also would be interesting because like people are talking about it because it's Alabama and it's Kaden Proctor. He's like, their starting left tackle as a freshman and things like that. But like the vitriol of the conversation and commentary has been very incredibly muted, which I always want to wonder, what if it were Miami? You know what I mean? Like if it were Miami with a player of that same caliber, would the conversation be as muted and accepting of things? I'm not quite sure. And maybe that's me projecting. I will accept that. But hey, it'd be like that.
Muting and accepting of things from just the general college football public. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, people with, podcasts and shows and blogs and, jobs who cover these sports and everything. Like there has not been the level of outrage which I expected to see from regarding the Kaden Proctor, and like specifically because it's Alabama, which Saban built into a dynasty program, which is a heritage program in the sport. And then like this player is one of the best players at his position, and the longevity because he's a true freshman 5-star, slides in at left tackle at Alabama, goes home to Iowa, right? And then and then Iowa admits we tampered with the kid. Like we're admitting our fault in this way, and people are talking about the portal and transfers and and like I just expected there to be more, just because there seems to be more energy about all of these individual things with other schools, including Miami. But this story has all of them together. Like this is a perfect storm. If you wanted to talk shit about the state of college football and recruiting and NIL and like if you wanted to, and there are people who want to, like this situation is presented to you on a silver platter. Like you couldn't tee the ball up better, for like tee it high and let it fly.
Yes.
But as I've been looking and listening and reading, it has not been that. And it's just, And for me, being a Miami alum, running a Miami blog website, and considering Miami, centering Miami in the conversation, and my thoughts are, I don't think that things would be as accepting if it were Miami centric. But again, that's me adding Miami to a situation which we are exterior from. So that's about that player and those schools, and that's that.
You're right. This situation has just about all the components of a big story and lightning rod type of conversations that could be capitalized upon. Very briefly, before we get back to Miami, just there are certain things within this entire process and timeline over the last year or plus that just, I guess it doesn't sit well with me in that, number one, he has to understand. Well, no, he's 19 years old, but his family, those people mentoring him should understand this is a big deal for the people you're committing to. For this school, this state, they don't have 5 stars on every street corner. You're a big deal. This school sees you as the fan base as, kind of a savior type. So first of all, you committed to them and flipped the day before National Signing Day. So
and we're committed to them for a long time, by the way.
Yes, you've done this to them before. And now you choose to leave Alabama. And it's not like he entered the transfer portal and said, I really enjoyed my 1 year at Alabama, but I want to explore my options and I'm out here and I just want to look around and visit here and visit. No, it was Iowa. I'm going home. I'm going back to Iowa. So then that either makes you think, okay, he really missed being home, and they probably really stepped up to make it worth his while to come back home. Some combination of those two things. So then for him just a few weeks later to then be wooed back to Alabama.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, folks, Miami-oriented questions, comments, whatever you've got there in the chat. Before we get to anything else, unless you've got something, Cam, I did want to ask you about Clemson has come out, even with more force, even though Florida State's been the ringleader in terms of we're going to be out there, we're going to be the loudest, we're going to be the boldest. In terms of verbiage, Clemson was really out there with, this contract is nonsensible. It's, just all the terminology that I don't have in front of me right this second. Just they were extremely strong in their verbiage about just the unfairness of this incomplete situation, nonsensical reading, wrong, inconsistent with the plain language of the agreement, which we've always heard that this grant of rights was written in such a way, maybe masterfully, that it couldn't be disputed because it's so clumsily written, but others would say it was poorly executed. But Clemson comes out, and I will say the one thing before you can take off on this that I found interesting, and it's not in the article that I'm looking at, one of the main college football insiders, and I would credit them if I could remember which one, pointed out that everything we know, the two of us and anyone who has been closely watching college athletics, is that these conferences, they are tightly knit. They go through a process of reviewing things, discussing things, voting on things before they take action. And the ACC just went after Florida State with this lawsuit without consorting with the rest of the conference and getting league-wide buy-in from its members.
Well, I mean, Florida State made no. The ACC precluded. They filed first, I believe is what it was. So they knew that Florida State was going to file suit. And then they, I am not a lawyer, but from what I heard from people who do have law degrees, including Bud Elliott, and, he's on the show, every day or 4 days a week, is, they're in cases such as this dispute, there is value to being the first to file. So the ACC, seeing that coming, they jumped the line and said, okay, we're going to put together a suit and file first in their dispute with Florida State about the grant of rights. The interesting thing that I gleaned, again, in my own way, as in like a person who knows how to read and everything, but not with a legal foundation and all that knowledge, what I found to be interesting was the specific point that Clemson seemed to be trying to fight on. Like you can fight on multiple fronts and you can say, okay, like they're like, no, it seemed to me from what was shared from different journalists, and they clipped out part of the filing, is what I saw was Clemson asserting that the grant of rights states that the television rights for each school are enforceable or dictated in the agreement as if and when this team or school is a member of the ACC, but makes no mention of if this school is a member of another conference or has disassociated with the ACC. So basically what I took that to be, and again, this is my interpretation, I could be completely and totally wrong, I'm just letting y'all know, is Clemson is saying, you are correct, ACC, Atlantic Coast Conference, that while our institution is a member of your conference, you hold all of the grant of rights for all of the games that we play. But if we removed ourselves either to independence or otherwise associated, you would not have the rights, because the rights are only enforceable if we are a member of the conference. So it seemed like they're trying to set up the lines to evaluate or of engagement right there, and saying, okay, like basically, yeah, if we're in the conference, sure, but if we're not, no. And it's one of those things like, is it explicitly stated or not stated if they are a member of elsewhere, or is there another clause or provision that has the entire length of the grant of rights regardless of conference affiliation or anything like that? I found that to be an interesting kind of focus for what they seem to be trying to lean on in their in their legal fight with the Atlantic Coast Conference. Again, that was from a little piece that I saw pulled out of the thing, put up on Twitter. I could be completely wrong. I could be missing other context and everything. I know that, AP Dirty Bird, if he's watching this, a good friend of mine from college who is a lawyer, is probably like, Cam, you were talking out of your keister. And I very well could be. That being said, so I just thought that was interesting from my estimation relative to, and that's different than what Florida State is saying, because Florida State is saying, like, basically the fee to get out is way too high, so lower that down. We can pay that, and they can pay that and leave. Could Miami follow suit? I don't know that Miami wants to be bold in that kind of a way. Again, Dan Radakovich, Miami's athletic director, who was at Clemson, then came to Miami. After he was at Miami, he was the first person to mention these things. And public schools, maybe have an easier facility to kind of take the blowback of public perception. And they're like, yeah, they're going to beat their chest and be out there a little bit more vocally. I think that, like, we're trying to move in silence a little bit more than that. I think also, like, Dan Radakovich is, I think, not to say that the other athletic directors are not intentional or calculating, but I think that he's calculating in a different kind of a way, especially at a Miami, a private school, smaller school and everything. Like, he's really looking and picking his spot to, like, because I don't think that he can, like, Miami does not desire to go out there in a braggadocious way and be like, oh, this, we're suing this, we're gonna try going here, try going there, blah, 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 blah. I think he's waiting, letting some things move, letting that legal fullback from Florida State or Clemson clear a little bit of a hole, and then figure it out and then go. So I mean, yeah, but at the end of the day, I do believe that Miami is going to be in that cadre with Florida State and Clemson and leaving the Atlantic Coast Conference. I hate this conference. They have never done right by Miami in any sport across the board. So I it's long past time for us to go. And that's regardless of the football team not being successful and not winning the championship. Like, even if we had won championships in this conference and everything, like, look at Florida State, look at Clemson. Like, other teams, other schools who have had that kind of on-field success still are trying to break down the door to leave out of this place. I think that Miami has that same mentality. I look forward to landing somewhere else. I didn't click it, but I saw an article come down Twitter. There's 247. One of their national writers was like trying to predict the next round of realignment and had Miami going to the Big 12. With all due respect, go fuck yourself. Like, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Mark, I apologize. I don't usually use language like that, and I don't use specifically directed language to a person like that either. But if you are thinking that Miami is going to go to from a third tier also ran conference to a third or fourth tier, let me stop before I really start spewing filth, floor, and filth. You must be out of your goddamn mind if you think that if there's going to be a realignment and Miami's not in that top cadre of whatever north, south, east, west, a la Dave Wanstead from the conversation he had with Falcon and TRX, whether it's one of the super leagues that looks like it's going to be the Fox or ESPN Super League. Like, if you think that the Miami Hurricanes, the University of Miami, is going to slide down to an also ran subsidiary, forgettable level of interaction at the highest level of this sport, get out of here.